So I'm talking about the paper assessing human and physical drivers of macroplastic debris spatially across Queensland. And this paper talks about how plastic pollution poses both an environmental and socioeconomic risks, but there's evidence for informing management, and evaluation of management is limited. Specifically, this paper is looking at how citizen scientists can provide a lot of opportunities in increasing the spatiotemporal scale of monitoring. So in this paper, they used data collected from a project here in Queensland called Reef Clean. And Reef Clean was a 5-year project from 2019, and it just wrapped up at the end of June this year. And it focused on marine debris monitoring, prevention, removal, and management along the coast of Queensland, along the Great Barrier Reef. And so there are 168 surveys in this paper from 17 beaches. And the reason this is Reef Clean was Australia's national, the reason this is important is because Australia is implementing a lot of plastics policies. So we have a new national plastics plan, which targets the removal of plastic debris and mitigating further debris. And then specifically in Queensland, where this study was, they have a plastic plan to phase out single-use items and reduce problematic and unnecessary plastic. So this image on the right is, as of 2023, they've banned lightweight plastic bags, straws, drink stirrers, cutlery, polystyrene food and drink containers, oxo-degradable plastics, plates and bowls. And then by the end of this year, they're trying to get rid of heavyweight carry bags, cotton bud sticks, EPS loose packaging, microbeads, and all of that will be banned. So with all of these policies in place, we want to be able to monitor, are they effective? So on the right-hand side, this is just showing all of the states in Australia and what they have banned as of 2023. So in the yellow, that's what Queensland is banning. And so coming back to the point of being able to monitor the effectiveness of all of these policies. So Tangaroa Blue Foundation has been doing beach cleanups in Queensland since 2008, I believe. So we have long-term data, but Reef Clean specifically implemented monitoring practices, which I'll talk about in a minute. So basically, the Reef Clean program is the first statewide program. So they're talking about that here just on the left-hand side, and I did a little more data. So it's the first statewide program to establish a coastal monitoring sites using standardized methods. So they used specific citizen science protocols established with universities around the east coast of Australia. So they could sample the debris and get both the densities and the accumulation rates, so they could be measured. And Reef Clean, as I mentioned, is coordinated by the Tangaroa Blue Foundation, but it's implemented by numerous partners. They collected quarterly data, so every 3 months they went out and collected data at these 17 sites between March 2019 and December 2021, although this program is still ongoing, so they are still collecting data. And they identified a range of human and physical drivers and their significance, while also accounting for, so they also accounted for COVID, because in Queensland, they had a lockdown for the entire state between April 2nd and the 16th of May, 2020. They put all of the debris categories into 5 different types. So they looked at multiple ones, but they put them into these 5 different aggregated debris categories and called them debris types in this paper. So then they also compared not just across the entire state, but they also compared between these natural resource management areas, which you can see in this figure here. So if you look along the coast of Queensland, you can see that there are 6 of these regions, all the way from the northern tip of Cape York down to what they call Burnett Mary. And then they looked at what factors might be influencing them. So in Australia, there's the South Equatorial Current that comes across, and then it splits on the continental shelf and becomes both the Erie Current and the East Australian Current going south. So they looked at wave and swell conditions because the Great Barrier Reef is along there as well, and that can influence the debris flux. So they looked at exposed beaches influenced by southeast trade winds, and tropical cyclones and monsoons. And then because they were doing citizen science, anything that was debris, they only collected stuff larger than 5 millimeters on ocean-facing sandy beaches. So then the specific plan on each of the sites was to look at transects, as I mentioned. So this was their sort of sample plan for that. They split the beach up into 4 transects. Each transect was 25 meters wide, and it went from the high tide line there in the sort of middle all the way up to the upper section and down to the low tide line. And then they also looked at sites. So the sites were sampled within 6 hours of the low tide, and the transect start and end points were fixed across survey rounds, so same spots, so that they could measure accumulation. And the accumulation rate was calculated by discarding the very first survey that they did, so that they assumed complete removal of debris, and they divided the counts by days since the last survey and the entire area surveyed. So they measured the length and the width. And surveys were conducted by a team of 2 or more who were trained in the sampling methodology. And then all data was uploaded to the Australian Marine Debris Initiative database, and quality assurance on the data was done by both the trained coordinator on site, and then once it was uploaded to the database, our database manager looks at that as well. So then in terms of the statistics they used, they looked at descriptive statistics, which I think they talk about up here. Yeah, so they looked at descriptive statistics and identified the most common items and the proportion of debris by material type. So they looked at the survey round, transect area, the season. We also had indigenous season, population within 10 kilometers, platform, like the site factors as well. And then they used general linear mixed models, and they also accounted for COVID, as I mentioned. The human and physical factors, they tested against the different debris types. So they had the total debris, which was all all debris. They had whole plastic items. Sorry, just believe they have a table for this one. Yeah, so here you go. In this table, they talk about how they had the 5 debris types: whole plastic items, commercial items, at-sea dumping, and single-use items. And then for their results, one of their big results was, let me scroll down there, this figure here. So this is by a natural resource management area. So that figure that I first showed you, there were the 6 sites all the way from Cape York up down to Burnett Mary. So for their 168 survey events, they collected a total transect area of 0.961 kilometers squared. And of the 662 transects sampled, 2.4% had no debris at all, did not recover debris. And only one event, like one entire survey event, was completely free from debris across all transects. And then you can see up in the top left, best observed debris accumulation was in Cape York, which is our northern tip spot. So it's actually quite remote. There aren't a lot of people there, which is quite interesting. And then the lowest was in the wet tropics, which is just south of Cape York. And that is second from the left on the bottom row. And that was hard plastics accumulated the most across all of the natural resource management areas. And 87% of all debris by density was dominated by plastic, as we would all expect. And then the composition varied across NRMs. So the contribution of all plastics, including hard, soft, expanded plastics, ranged from 44% to expanded plastics, which was only 2%. And if you looked at not just the fragmented debris that was collected, the whole debris that was collected, the most common item they found was plastic lids. So then they also looked at their model, which is here. So this table here, table 2 also goes along with figure 4, which I'll talk about in a second. But if you look at table 2 here, you can see they looked at it by the debris category types as they mentioned, and then they also looked at which of the variables were significant. So in the total debris, the distance to the nearest town was significant. But if you looked, they were also looking at whether the COVID lockdown was significant. And you can see that, or what they found was that both pre and post lockdown was the same. So there was no significant difference. So they didn't find that COVID had an impact on their sites, which was slightly unexpected. And then across all of the models for all the debris, they found that modal beach state, orientation, transect section, they were all significant explanatory variables for them. And then it varied a little bit between the other explanatory variables. So population within 10 kilometers of each site was a significant predictor for commercial fishing debris, but distance to nearest town was significant for total debris. So again, going to look at the other figure that goes with that, just scrolling down. So figure 4. I think the text, the figure 4 caption is actually a little bit wrong. I don't think this is actually by their NRM region, or at least not that I was able to tell. But this does show the 5 debris types on the x-axis and then the other explanatory variables on the y-axis. And you can see that distance to the nearest town was a significant explanatory variable for all debris types, which is total debris, which is on the far right. And they found that debris counts were increasing with distance from the nearest town. So in the more remote areas, they actually found more total debris, which matches up with what they were talking about Cape York having the highest accumulation rates. And that is a little bit contrary to what a lot of the literature says, but that is because Cape York gets a lot of debris from sea source debris rather than land source debris. And then if you look at human population density within 10 kilometers, that demonstrated no significant relationship to any debris type aside from commercial fishing. And then higher debris counts were observed for the upper and middle sections of the beach. So on the bottom of the figure 4 there's section, and it has upper, middle, lower for all of the debris types. And you can see that although the magnitude varied across the models, with a smaller effect size for at-sea dumping and commercial fishing, it was consistently, there was a significant effect for all of the debris types with higher accumulation rates at the top, at the upper section of the beach. So then if you look at figure 5, which is just below here, you can see that they were looking at the 4 modal beach states. So they looked at what type of beaches were. And so in plot A, you can see the reflective plus bars and rip beaches. So that's the second one from the right, second one from the left in plot A. It's sort of a dark, I think, bluish color. And they had a negative relationship with debris count relative to the other modes of the beach. And all models identified increasing debris for the beach and sand flats, which is the far left one on plot A. And although the highest observed counts were within ultra dissipative beach, which is the far right, so that sort of light blue one. And then both beach sand flats and ultra dissipative beach site are characterized by narrow beach, very wide intertidal zone, and shallow dissipative surf zone that reduces wave energy. So the 2 states may retain debris that's relative to the other 2 sites, other 2 states of the beach. And then in plot B, you can look at the orientation of the beach sites. You have north and northeast facing beaches with a negative relationship with debris counts. So those are the 2 bars on the left on plot B, while the south and southeast and east southeast beaches had increased counts. So the 2 far right on plot B. And higher debris counts were observed for upper and middle sections of the beach, although the magnitude varied across the models, with smaller effect sizes for items related to at-sea dumping and commercial fishing. So then if you took a look at, I think this was actually in the supplementary material. In the supplementary material, they actually looked at it by NRM region as well. So you could see how it broke down by NRM region, which is quite interesting because they're all quite different between Australia, like the characteristics of each of them are quite different. I'm just finding it here. I think is figure 2. Yeah, this one here. So if you look, you can see that they did it by the type of materials on the left. So hard plastic, soft plastic, expanded glass, ceramic. And across, this is broken down into transects. So you have your lower, your middle, and your upper. And then across the bottom of each is the natural resource management area. So you can see that it's lowest in the lower part of the beach, which is as expected. Stuff can get carried away or washed away. They expected it to be more debris along the middle high tide line because that's sort of where stuff gets left. And you can see it does increase here, especially with the hard plastics at the top. But what they did find was that the highest occurred in the upper section of the beach. And they actually figure that that's because once it's on the beach, there are other processes such as wind that might carry that debris further up the beach. It might get stuck in other areas. So there might be small bushes, or there might be little trees or rocks or something that's more in the upper section of the beach, which might cause that accumulation rate to be higher up in the upper section. So then if we go back to the other one, so if we go back there, they sort of start discussing about what all this means for us here in Australia. And basically, they found that hard plastics are the most common item. Pretty much everything is related to the fragmentation. So they didn't find a lot of debris that was whole. They did find whole items, but the majority were fragmented plastics. And this poses a problem because we don't necessarily know the source of these items. So here in the Reef Clean program, they were trying to do source reduction plans. So trying to identify which items we could stop at the source. So it's important to know that. But in this case, there was mostly hard plastics that were fragmented. The intact items that they find, they did determine that they were most likely from littering, and they tended to be closer to cities. So that was related to their distance from population center. And then that was followed by commercial fishing items, 6% of total. And does align with the levels that are reported here in Australia, but is lower than neighboring countries within the Asia Pacific. And they referenced another there. But their big sort of takeaway was that in terms of distance to population, they found that Cape York is our most remote area. There's not many people up there, and yet still they were finding the most debris up there. So it's coming from somewhere else, most likely, or being carried away from different parts of Australia and littered onto the beach. So it's really important that when we are choosing sites for us to clean up, citizen scientists, or whether formal monitoring plans or any sort of cleanup, it's really to take note of the physical and human drivers. So that could be site orientation, the modal beach state, cross beach section, where is that debris? Where do we think that debris is coming? So sites oriented towards the prevailing wave energy throughout the year, linked to higher debris counts. So maybe going to those sites when the wave energy is high so that you get the most return by cleaning those beaches. And again, this comes back to monitoring. So citizen science is such an important part because there are, at least here in Australia, not enough funding to really cover all of the same space resolution at the same frequency. We don't have enough funding, there's not enough people. So citizen science can do a lot in terms of monitoring and evaluating how effective all of these programs that they're implementing, such as the bans, the International Plastic Treaty, how effective is that going to be over a long period? So really important that they consider citizen science as a tool for doing that. And that was the takeaway of the paper, or at least that was my takeaway of the paper. Apologies for none of the slides coming through.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
Thank you, Ms. Lincoln, for this interesting talk. And actually, my name is Pusit. I'm from southern of Thailand. I got my degree from James Cook University. So kind of really into your talk, and is interested to see that many beaches in the remote area, there's even no finding of the debris. And interesting to see that you working and try to find for the very small fragment for the microplastic on the beach. Yeah, we have run beach cleanup programs also in the local area, and in this month, I mean actually last month, we have 2 with the local school student near the local village. And probably the situation in Thailand is different from in Australia, for sure, that we have a lot of single-use plastic problem. But I think also it's your findings that the citizen science project will boost the local community or help this helping this problem, and add to Thailand. Maybe the local or the government system is not that good yet, so we can use this to boost their awareness and try to help in this. Maybe I have one question that's you if I'm not wrong, you're talking about your also collecting the small fragment, 5 millimeters. And also, I'm not sure if you categorize them into a microplastic or mesoplastic in the findings. Thanks.
So in this paper, we consider anything greater than 5 millimeters to be macroplastic. They do sample for microplastics using a different methodology. They don't talk about that in this paper, but they take quadrats and use another citizen science initiative called OSMAP, Australia Microplastics Assessment Project. And they do that along the same transects, but they didn't talk about that here in this paper. But they do follow that as well. And I do know that in terms of citizen science, as you were mentioning, being an important part, this same data from this project, although not in this paper, has been used in a different paper that's currently under review to talk about how you can use citizen science for reporting on the Sustainable Development Goals. So how do you report plastic debris density at a national level using citizen science projects? So it has been used, but in this case, this isn't focusing on the microplastics.
Apologize, I said it wrong. That's we did you did the mesoplastic, the 5 millimeter to the 2.5 centimeters. And in the past, I did I have done something with the visible microplastic, 1 to 5 millimeters, and try to relate that to the fragments of the mesoplastic. So we try to promote the local cleanup, like try to find the correlation with the removal of the small fragment when we try to clean the beach. So we find that at the 5-star hotel where they always clean their beach, so they look very clean, like at some area. So we find that's a very small number of the microplastic, visible microplastic. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for question and answers. And
we will see the figures and tables from the main paper. We have a limited time, so just I'd like to share the figure. Could you have, if you have any questions from these figures or tables and presentation, please share your opinions and questions. Can you see the paper now?
Yes.
This is the figure 1 for the location of the monitoring site, and figure 2. This is the transact, actual survey transact, and 25 meters, and they divided 3 parts, upper, middle, and lower. And table 1 is the explanation for the debris type, total debris, whole plastic item, commercial fishing item, SC dumping, and single-use items, and more details. And average accumulation for debris material. And you can see the material on the left, and the x-axis means the location, I mean the division, 6th division from the Queensland. And you can see the accumulation, I mean the abundance of the debris by the color. You can they differentiated accumulation level by color. And next one, this is the, I think this is the important table, and Ms. Lincoln explained a lot for this table. For variables, they divided, they tested for total debris and the whole plastic item and commercial fishing item and acid dumping items and single-use items. And you can see the p-value, how significant how the variables impact the accumulation levels, and significantly. We have just limited time, but please see the star, 3 stars and 1 star like that, and more star means they impact, influence the debris significantly. And next figure or tables, and this figure, percentage composition by material for total debris for natural resource management. Same way, please see the color, where dark red one means higher, and you can see the circle by size, bigger and smaller one, and you can see the value. And this is for transact position, upper, middle, lower, and platform. I mean the substrate of the site, and beach orientation and beach state, and population, and low distance from the site, from the is the population center. Okay. Next one is the debris density for survey site. This is left one is model beach state, like beach and ultra dispersive, and on the right, and left one is beach and SF means where is it? You can see the
Sand flats.
Yeah. Next figure, please. And that's all. You can tell us, or Ms. Heidi, to point to the figure number or table number and ask. Please share your opinion and questions.
So sorry about the technology. I'm so sorry.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Lincoln Hood, for the explanation. I'm wondering, I'm understanding that this Lip Clean project is a kind of a statewide citizen science monitoring program for Queensland, Australia. And you told that this program will be complete this year. So I'm wondering, do you have any plan to expand this program to nationwide program for Australian continent, or what is your future plan for your citizen science marine debris monitoring program?
Yes, so currently we have funding for continuing this program specifically until they did an extension until the end of October. And we're currently applying to continue the funding for Queensland specifically until 2027. So they're hoping to continue this program in Queensland until 2027 with the hope to expand across the nation. We do have like a government organization who is trying to also implement formal monitoring, which is going slowly because they are starting from scratch. So Australia, we do have people around Australia who are doing similar monitoring, but it's not as high spatially. So we do on the West Coast have a few sites, and we're looking at applying to grants to expand that into a similar monitoring program, but it's all about funding.
Thank you.
Mostly just to make sure everyone is trained on the transect side of things. The beach cleanups and monitoring has been going on since 2004, and we do that everywhere. But
thank you. Do you have any questions, opinions? And you can share your monitoring experience with us.
me,
Do you have
I think monitoring has been going really well. I think it took a little while to sort of get the sites right. As they mentioned in the paper, they started more sites than that, but there are lots of, they have to evaluate safety as well. So in that area, sometimes there are quite a lot of safety concerns, specifically regarding, they have saltwater crocodiles there. So sometimes when sites are a bit dangerous, they've switched them out. So there is long-term monitoring there, which is good because it helps obviously get a baseline and continuing to collect that data, but also we get a lot of volunteers who come out and help. And that's, again, just building capacity. We work with traditional owners a lot, and a lot of organizations, businesses, corporations that come help out with the monitoring, which has been really good for creating a program that lots of people know about, lots of people count, and a big part of that has been the Great Barrier Reef. Lots of people are very invested in maintaining the Great Barrier Reef as a World Heritage Site. So that's been a really great start. And again, trying to expand into other places that are a little less well known, we're working towards.
Thank you. Any questions? Actually, I have one question. This paper deal with monitoring data from Queensland. Do you have any idea for this one focused on, especially for Queensland data? I think you have more data for other areas, like southeastern or.
Yep. So in terms of citizen science data, we have data from all across Australia. So Tangaroa Blue and the Australian Marine Debris Initiative started on the west coast of Australia, and they've been doing beach cleanups and auditing and collecting all of the data since 2004. So it's not only beaches as well, it's estuaries, parks, everywhere, and it ranges all across Australia. So not just Queensland. Queensland has just been the main focus these past 5 years because of this specific monitoring program that was well funded.
All right. Thank you very much for the presentation. I have a short, simple question. You choose the size range of the target as larger than 5 millimeters. But the abundance of marine debris is very depend on the size range. So if you consider the size range, I'm just wondering why you integrate the whole the sizes macro, which are larger than 5 millimeters, rather than separate the debris larger than 25 millimeters and in between macro and micro size. Would you?
So the reason for choosing 5 millimeters is because that's what has been done throughout all of Tangaroa's history. So since 2004, they've always collected things greater than 5 millimeters. So in order to be able to compare across other sites that have been historically done that way, they left it at 5 millimeters. And then when working with the citizen scientist initiative that does the microplastic sampling, they said that that worked for them and that they would focus on the microplastics side of things. So yeah, it would definitely change accumulation, abundance, all of that sort of data would change depending on which size range you looked at. But the reason they chose this one is because it is consistent with the historic data. And now the new app, so originally you couldn't note down size in the data unless you physically wrote it in and added it as a note. But they upgraded the Australian Marine Debris Initiative app, which is what everyone uses to log the data. Now, they just released that in March 2023. And now every item that you log, you can put the size if you want. So if it's a very large item, you can put how big it is. If it's a very small item, you can put all of that information. It just depends on how much time someone has to commit to putting each item's size information, but you can put color, size, all of that. So we're hoping to, again, collect more data so that you could then focus on the data if you wanted to only look at debris that was between 5 millimeters and 500 centimeters or something like that. You would be able to narrow it down based on the data collected. But historically, we haven't been able to do that, which is why we stuck to what was consistent with the data.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. My question was similar, and from my side, my question is the unidentified fragment accounted for a large percentage, according to this paper. That means this size is like under 25 millimeter. I mean 5 to 25. That's small size. Just fragmented doesn't mean the size.
No, fragmented doesn't mean the size in this case. So the way that they've always done a plastic fragment is that it has to be less than 50% of its original item. So anything, it could be a barrel, and if it's a quarter a plastic drum barrel, that's technically a hard plastic fragment in the way they look at the data, because you can guess that it's from that, but because it's not enough information to say that for sure it's from this, they went with anything less than 50% of its original form is considered a plastic fragment.
Okay.
So it's not size dependent.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any questions or opinions? And then I think we can close the seminar, and fully volunteered. So please prepare for September 5th seminar. And thank you again for participating in this seminar. Please continue, join us. Thank you. Bye-bye.